Also, this music got very, nursery rhymey. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for stopping by to the September edition of the State of the Game for Tough Love Arena, playable now at toughlovearena.com. The past. How was August? The plan for August was that we were going to be picking up the pieces, because this was after the short break, after I'd been sick for a little while. We were planning to continue mod support, and we did these two goals. I was hoping to continue work on the desktop release. I didn't quite get as far as I wanted, but I put a little asterisk because I did something related to the desktop release. We'll get to that in a moment. What actually happened in August was really this. I was still recovering from mono, and then I had a long planned trip to go visit my family for about 2 weeks. August was not the best time to get work done, but luckily this last week has been very productive, so we have much to discuss. So I'm happy. We added some things I've been meaning to add for a long time, like win and loss poses. We added a lot of improvements to mod and the training mode. We've done a little bit of character stuff with Caber Toss and some really recent changes to Onion. Yeah, I think it was a solid month for features. Made some more progress on making this the game, taking it to where I want Tough Love Arena to be eventually. On the side of infrastructure and tech debt, I fixed some long-standing bugs with the UI, fixed a bunch of bugs with little edge cases in gameplay that I didn't realize. A big one is adding mobile controller support. If you start the game and then connect a peripheral device, it should pop up the button mapping menu. I just shipped that like a day or two ago. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback on it yet, so if you are a mobile player and if you have a Bluetooth controller, please test it out and let me know either via Twitter or Discord how that works for you. And a really important one for me is render FPS. I'm continuing to work on improving the performance of the game so that it can run more consistently at a stable frame rate. Performance has always been really important to me. It got sidelined with a lot of features and other important things. One out I had made months ago, you can change this setting called render FPS, where the gameplay will always happen at 60 FPS, but it won't draw at 60 FPS. You can choose to crank it down to 30 or 40 or 45 FPS, and just draws a little less frequently. And honestly, it's pretty hard to notice because our animation is mostly done at about 12 FPS, and now suddenly you're doing half the drawing, your game should run much more consistently. And little did I know, it never worked. I had all the logic for frame skipping in, I had all the logic for you to change the setting, but at some point I either forgot or I accidentally deleted the small piece of code that actually links the two up. Finally fixed that. So if you are playing on a weaker computer, if you're having issues where you can't hit 60 FPS, try lowering the render FPS. You don't have to go straight to 30, you can try to decrease a little. So I'm very excited about that. That really empowers me to potentially bring back an old feature that I had to scrap, performance test before you go online. So if you play online, you can ensure that your opponent is running at 60 FPS. On the community side, we continue to update and maintain the Hall of Fame for people who aren't aware. If you go to toughlovearena.com, go into the extras and go into Hall of Fame. Here it lists all of the tournaments and the champion. If anyone runs a bracket, I am more than happy to add it to the game and immortalize people. I want to reward people for playing my game and taking it seriously and trying to play it in a tournament, and this is in the game and will continue to be in the game forever. Otherwise, from what I consider community changes, I added a lot of new options, lots of new knobs for the modding scene. This is still far from done in the case of like customized assets, but we've already had a small burgeoning mod scene in the Discord. People are making all sorts of goofy characters, making cool super attacks, and I want to continue to support them and give them the tools that they need to have fun in the Tough Love Arena engine. And another thing that I've worked on a lot this last month that I'm very excited to announce is playing Tough Love Arena on a Raspberry Pi. So you can go to that URL right now if you wish, and it has full instructions on how to set up the operating system and get a special script I wrote that automatically downloads the latest version of the game, updates everything, and then runs it offline. This is the Raspberry Pi. I've always had the hope of sort of consoleizing Tough Love Arena like this. I want to take Tough Love Arena on the road. I want to take it to local events. And they are mini computers. And this has been a very promising proof of concept. There are still some minor issues, so I'm not calling this production ready yet. And my next task will be trying to procure and run it on older, simpler, lower performance Pi models. Wait, now if I want, I can make a TLA cabinet. That's exactly the point. Super excited about these, about the potential for this. This is what I meant by the asterisk on desktop release. Let's continue to the present. Time for a drink. I'm gonna start coughing soon at this rate. Okay, quick little health check. The population has actually been slowly increasing. If you want some hard numbers on percentages and stuff, you can subscribe to our Patreon, where we break down our full costs, revenue, and analytics. Short version, we've been getting more users. I suspect because, school's starting back up, but whatever the cause, we're more than happy to have it. Also, now that my health has improved, dev streams will resume starting tomorrow. I've been working on offline events, so again, the Raspberry Pi. I've actually been talking with some local venues here in New York City about starting up some TLA weeklies or some casual get-togethers, but I was also talking to someone out of the sort of Baltimore, DC area about trying to get Tough Love Arena at a tourney there this month. But I'm really excited about trying to bring Tough Love Arena offline and spreading the word of mouth that way. Gameplay design. Blue Life is currently under reevaluation. I added Blue Life in response to a scenario that I was perceiving where play was getting pretty passive. And I understand how that can come from blocking being strong. We want blocking to be strong. That's important to me. That said, I'm watching high-level play, and it feels a little campy. So I was trying to think of a mechanic that could help sort of break stalemates, give you an incentive to just, keep sort of testing them with your buttons. But I'm not confident right now that it's actually accomplishing the goals I set out to do. If we have a superfluous system that's adding complexity to the game, but it's not doing what it's supposed to, I am not married to that mechanic. I want to add something that encourages you to be aggressive. And if Blue Life isn't working, if Blue Life adds too much complexity, if Blue Life is too confusing for new players, then it might be removed. Rejection, I think, is good. I really like having a defensive option for half bar. However, I have gotten some complaints in the feedback that sometimes they've gotten it on accident. It's been a little confusing, and I've saw some complaints about whether it should be plus or minus if it's baited. I think there's places where rejection can be tweaked and further refined. In general, I don't see myself removing rejection. I'm very excited about rejection. And I love the animation Amy made for it, the exploding heart with the smoke. It's so beautiful. Mwah. And lastly, I'm continuing to look for ways to add more options and flavor to characters, with the caveat of that don't fundamentally change their gameplay. Good example being the whip around that we just added to Rice. More on that as I get to the characters, but Blue Life, Rejection, pretty good. Characters, continuing to tweak. So before I forget, let's actually hop over to that survey real quick. So we ended up getting 82 responses, which I'm absolutely floored about and super happy. And I'm very excited to start doing this every month, and we can start basically comparing the numbers over time. The majority of players consider TLA fun to play. I'm glad. I'm very glad that people generally think it's very easy to learn the basics. That's really important to me. That's mission statement number 1. I want TLA to be a great beginner fighting game, an introduction to the 2D fighting genre, but I also want it to have enough complexity, enough depth, that experienced players and franchise players like myself don't immediately get bored and move on. So I'm satisfied with this middle-of-the-road answer. Tough Love Arena is never going to be Guilty Gear. It's never even going to be Street Fighter V. But I'm happy that people feel that there's some juice to the game. How likely are you to play again? How likely are you to recommend to beginners? How likely are you to recommend to experienced? And I'm not going to go through all the notes, but I want to say the notes were really useful for me personally. Thank you so much for everyone who took the time to write out a sentence. I will be releasing a PDF of this. The comments themselves I really want to share with the community so people can see how they feel. How fun is this character to play? Mostly positive. However, Rice was a little bit more leaning negative. Noodle is definitely leaning negative. Noodle is by far the least fun character to play. That leads me, and segues perfectly, into the next slide, which is about Noodle. Some recent changes, I nerfed the damage on Whip because I nerfed a lot of heavies. But plan changes, Noodle is getting a large redesign soon. And by large redesign, I mean Grounder and Fist are going to be completely reworked. I'm really excited to give Noodle more options, because I still feel strongly that Noodle should be a low damage character. But I think that Noodle's tools for space control, or for zoning, or even just for confirming a little bit of damage could be more interesting. Very excited for Noodle. Lots of stuff coming to Noodle soon. Rice got a lot of small recent changes, some minor nerfs in terms of damage and meter gain, a small buff to SWAT, which was honestly an oversight. I added the whip around because I thought it'd be flavorful, extra little option for Rice, and a cool little thing to be different from Noodle. And I removed the sequence of whip, pounce, swipe. Since the damage nerf, it was unintentionally or unintuitively doing more damage than whip. If you press that second whip and it's blocked, that has consequences for you as Noodle, negative consequences. And Rice just didn't seem to have that. In retrospect, it was too strong. Rice still has options. Rice can still lay on multi-layered pressure, and Rice still has good damage with the SWAT loops. But I think whip, swipe is a little much. Beef. A lot of people have been telling me for the last 2 months that Beef is basically the best character in the game. At present, I'm happy with where Beef is. Lemon RC is strong, but very expensive, so no plan changes for Beef. And also, the art progress. You can check it live by doing the command !beef bar if you're in Discord. Amy has this little online chart that she's been keeping updated, and Beef's been coming along great. Pork. I think Pork is in a great place. Pork got their heavy nerfed in damage because that was a universal change to the meats, but the important buff that Pork got was getting basically back their old Caber Toss with essentially a small damage nerf. And I think Pork is in a good place. I don't want Pork to be the strongest character in the game. Having the sort of grappler slash mix-up character don't think is great for the health of the game, but I want Pork to be a contender. Onion got a bunch of changes recently. Fixed the multi-parry cancel window, which was a little broken. We added empty hop so that Onion has a sort of distinct option when trying to jockey in for space. And lastly, we redesigned Cackle again to essentially be a hybrid of the previous version. It's not quite as strong or as versatile as the original Cackle from day one, where you could act completely freely and get a huge damage combo. But I also think it's a little bit more creative and situational and interesting than the roundhouse Cackle that would pop them up for a 4-hit combo. So I'm very excited about the current version of Cackle. I'm very optimistic that this is the final one. I'm still on the lookout for maybe giving Onion one more variation option like empty hop, but nothing else is currently on the roadmap. And last we have Garlic. Garlic's been great. I think Garlic's in a great place. By design, I think that the character meant to have the sort of highest ceiling with all their movement options. And as a result, I have to be very careful. If I change one thing, Garlic could easily become the strongest character in the game. It's still pretty bad in the corner, but that goes with Garlic's design. That is the price you pay for otherwise being able to move so freely everywhere else. And now it's time to talk about the future. Take a little sip. What do we have coming up? New sound effects. We are finally done recording and mastering them. Big thanks to Amy. And so now I just have the task of adding them to the game in a way that's also backwards compatible. It's a whole shebang. As mentioned before, I plan to experiment with Blue Life this month. See if there's some way I can massage it to either more actively incentivize pressure or if I should just remove it altogether. There's the big noodle rework that I previously mentioned. And sort of in the background, I will continue to add more fields for mod support. Something at the top of my mind is adding optional meter requirements to moves that, again, will be pretty cleanly backwards compatible with Rapid and Burst. And as this Raspberry Pi work winds down, I plan to get back to the desktop releases. It's just a lot of reading documentation, starting a task, waiting 10 minutes, see if it worked. As I'm wrapping up one grindy task, I plan to pick up that grindy task again. We have the Halloween tournament. Very spooky. Porkenstein, Pumpkin Spice Rice, Vamp Garlic, Ghost Onion, Mummy Noodle, and Bloody Beef. On Friday, October 15th, everyone can play with all 6 skins. And everyone who enters the tournament and participate in the tournament, you get to have one skin. You can spend the day trying out all 6, and whoever you like the best, you can have that skin forever. Top 8 gets to unlock all 6. And the challenge bracket is now live. So if you go to the events page, events.toughlovearena.com, you'll be able to find the challenge for the Halloween tournament. And as long as you show up, you'll get a color. Also, to be clear, this is the alt on their finished versions, right? So the characters whose art aren't done, they're going to have slightly simpler versions of the skins. But if you unlocked Porkenstein, whenever the finished Pork art comes out, you will get the finished Pork version of Porkenstein. So this is what we plan to have available for the tournament. Super excited to have this, and this is why we made that change a week ago to the character select. Now when you choose colors, it's like a carousel. So now we can add more colors like this. Moving on. Quarantine Report 4! Sadly, we do not have skins for these characters. You cannot play as COVID Rice and COVID Pork. But Amy did this wonderful custom art for the tournament so we can advertise it and stuff. Way back in, I want to say March or April, we teamed up with Quarantine Report, which is a charity tournament series that does online tournaments. We are very happy to announce that we'll be doing this again in mid-November. So it'll be November 12th at 7 p.m. The challenge for this is also on the events page. There is the option to donate through challenge, which goes to Direct Relief, which is a COVID charity. I believe there's also like a raffle of some indie fighting games. But I know you can check their information on the Quarantine Report Twitter. I think there's some games like Slap City and Punch Planet in there giving out free Steam copies. This one will be more traditional. We're going to have a pot bonus of $100. Look out for that. Again, it's pretty far away at this point, a full 2 months. So we'll bring it up and advertise it more as we get closer. But just wanted to share this amazing art that Amy finished. And I think that takes us to our Q&A. Shine Ninja asks, since it's been forever since you haven't streamed, I have several questions. First, what do you think of the mods people have made? Second, are there going to be official TLA modded tournaments? Third, do you have any 3 major design philosophies for making and balancing TLA characters? Whew, okay. I have been super impressed with the amount of mods people are making. I would love to devote like a stream or a day to perusing all this stuff and checking it out. I'm super excited about what people have done. Second, I know that the Tough Love Gauntlet people are trying to set up something for pretty soon, this month, and they've been trying to vet mods and find stuff that's relatively well balanced. So I super support their effort, and I'll be doing everything in my power to advertise their event and maybe even hop on comments if I'm available. As for an official tournament hosted by me, I could totally see that happening in the future. Yes, I would love to do it, but I can't give a promise that it's going to be this month or something. Third, do you have any major design philosophies? It's hard to put into words. It's a lot of trial and error. The best thing I can summarize is I was fortunate to pretty early on luck into what seemed like a pretty decent RPS in terms of, the long range, the mid range, and the short range character. And as I've continued to change things and make additions and modifications, I try to be really careful to not make any character obsolete. If you're going for balance, do something different, do something exciting, or do something, boring and reliable, but try not to make it obsolete another character, or especially your own character. Okay, this character's a zoner, and this other character's just a better zoner. Try not to fall into that trap. At least maybe have them cover different areas of the screen, or have different, strengths and weaknesses. You have to know your character's strength as you're designing them, but also you have to know their weakness, and really keep that in mind, and make sure those stay pronounced, because those help drive your players to the strengths. Because they realize, I don't have a good long-range poke, so instead I'm going to focus on dash, which gets me in close to do my really strong close-range combo opportunities. Kenny Rose asks, are you feeling better? I am. I'm still a little coughing. The way mono works, I'll probably be fatigued for a couple months, which just means I'm a little more tired than usual. I'm definitely feeling a lot better. Fast John asks, is it possible to mod TLA on the phone? It should be possible right now to load and play mods on your phone. As for actually doing the modifications, I intentionally hid that menu just because I assumed it would be a miserable experience. Now, granted, I am biased because I have a very small phone. What phone do you have? This is a iPhone SE. Specifically the one that came out right after the 6. So it's the brain of a 6, maybe a 6S, in the chassis of a 5. And I've never upgraded because this is my perfect ideal phone size. I'm going to use this for as long as I can. Let me know if this looks good or if you can see too much of my pores. Scrolling back up. Why does reject give virtually the same reward whether you block it or not? Meet or not, I feel that I should read my opponent's defensive option. I should be rewarded for it. How often are you blocking reject? People are seeming to block reject a lot more than I anticipated. I didn't really put a lot of thought into the numbers on block because I thought it would be a very rare occurrence. I will admit that. I'm planning for it to be minus. Not minus enough to punish, but minus enough that it's still the other person's turn. A very legit question, is the lemon alive? Next question. Handsome Phil says, who are your top 3 favorite TL players to watch in no particular order? Let me check who has given me subs most recently. That's a very good question, but I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Let me just say garlic players. Gillyboat4 said, would it be possible to make a legacy version mode where old patches can be played? Technically, kind of. A lot of the external systems like online mode or APIs or leaderboards just are completely broken if you try to just load up old code. However, the gameplay itself mostly works because it's self-referential, it's a closed system, like how we sort of hosted the April Fools, but I also just don't see the utility. I have to make a lot of hard choices about prioritization. So it is possible, but I don't see it coming out anytime soon. Kenny Rose says, what do you think about the layers with respect to push blocking and Skullgirls? You can bait it and punish their misinput, and some moves kind of stick to characters even after push blocking. Can TLA reject have those layers? Maybe, Kenny. That's a really good point. Especially maybe if we moved it to a different input like forward heavy, which is easier to sort of, bait and frame trap or whiff punish. So yeah, I don't think push blocking is a good fit for TLA. I really love push blocking as a mechanic in both Skullgirls and the Marvel vs. games, but it makes sense in a game where the offense is so strong because you have air dashing and assists and all this other stuff. Appreciate the nuance of your question, which is specifically the layers of play. So I agree, I'd like to have that with reject. And maybe by changing the input, that's a way we could do it. Fast John asks, are you still open to adding more universal mechanics to the game if possible? I'm open to it, Fast John. We added rejection in Blue Light very recently, but only if they serve a purpose and don't make the game too complicated. I still want the game to be very pick up and playable, but if we can find a place to sort of sneak it in and it provides good value, 100%. ESID asks, premium accounts? That's an oldie. I remember when I promised that back in like March or April. I still want to add premium accounts. It's still part of my larger roadmap, but I think as the player base shrunk in the summer, it further sort of disincentivized me from adding it. It makes me really nervous to take people's money, both because I want to be really careful with that transaction in a way I don't have to be, where if I apparently broke all of Rice's combos, which someone just told me that I did, I can just fix it tomorrow, and people are a little inconvenienced. It's not ideal, but this is the benefit of, a startup mindset of moving fast and breaking things. And you have to be a lot more careful when you start taking credit cards. There are certain places where you can't break things. And also it adds a different dynamic to the developer-player relationship when I start to have players who feel like essentially a level of entitlement that you don't have when you're playing a free game. And that's just an added level of pressure that I haven't been super eager to explore. It's still on the to-do, but it keeps getting deprioritized because other stuff comes up that feels very urgent, and honestly, it makes me feel a little icky. How many frames per second are the character animations of TLA? You can actually check if you go into the mod tool and look at the individual moves. The general rule of thumb is that the game logic is 60 frames per second, and most animations are held for 5 frames, meaning that you get 12 drawings in a second, aka 12 FPS. When you talk about animation language, drawing on the ones, that's in the context of film, which is 24 frames per second. By holding it for 5/60th of a second, it's the equivalent of animating on the twos. That said, there are a lot of places where, because of game balance, I have inflated something to 7 frames, or I've shortened it to 3 frames. It's not always going to cleanly map to 5, but that's mostly how the animation works. Smack says, not a question, but I want to say that I appreciate your dedication to making TLA so open and toolable. As a technology instructor, it's really exciting to see all the potential for modding an open source game on a Raspberry Pi. Thank you, Smacks. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say. How to get neutral as garlic. I don't know. ESID clarifies, the April Fool question was about using April Fool animation for mods. Yes, the sprites are all technically still on the public server, so if you can guess the file names, they're all yours. Young Strike says, Paul, will premium account owners get the cool Halloween skins? Currently, no. For people who are already premium accounts because of VIP access, we're not planning to enable it for them. In the same way that I don't think premium accounts have access to the ranked skins either, there's still essentially the backdoor of modding. You can create a mod version and easily have access to the skins by just moving them from the locked category to the open category. But I think it's important to me to have that as a little reward. So if you see someone in the casual queue, that means they earned it. ESID asks about the ranked colors. So every character has a skin that if you make it to hot rank, which is 1700 MMR, you unlock this additional color for that character on your account. And you don't have to worry about going below, because I know how bad that could feel. And as long as that all-time high number is over 1700, you get the skin. This is more like a joke, but can there be a Baroque kind of tech? Like you sacrifice a bit of health to get more chip damage or damage on combos. Baroque is from TVC, right? I think that's where I've heard that. I don't actually know how that works. Special technique done by pressing the partner plus any attack button. Sacrifices the red portion of your life gauge because it's a team game, canceling your current attack animation, making you flash. Interesting. So it's like a rapid with a damage boost, and you sacrifice potential health. TLA doesn't really have a one-to-one there because we don't really have potential health. It could be cool as a mechanic. I'm not sure. The other big problem is just where do we put the input? I think it's an interesting idea, R-Titan. I think it's a totally valid design space, and I'll keep it in mind, but I don't see myself adding it in the near future. Young Strike says, Paul, how do you feel about Sneak RC? Absolutely not. It's too easy to land a yellow sneak, and if you can convert that into a full combo, that's too G-Gen. Sorry. Oh, I forgot to mention this. One suggestion I heard somewhere that I'm actually planning to try out that I'm really excited about, what is, if you RC while someone is in exhausted, so you've launched them, but you can't hit them anymore, and they're about to land on the ground and be hard knocked down. If you RC, they will regain juggle points. So you could use RCs to extend aerial combos. That is on my list to experiment with. It could be cool. What about 2-character games? I would love to make a team game. I mean, when Skullgirls first came out like 10 years ago, it killed all my enthusiasm for making an indie fighting game because I was like, this is it. This is the game I want to make. I would love to make a tag game. I don't think TLA is the right fit for it, nor has enough character variety to support it. So maybe many, many years from now. But I think tag games are very difficult to make as a solo team. That might be something you can only really scale up with more help, more hands on deck. I'm going to call it there. I can't talk anymore. So thank you everyone to stop by to watch me talk about Amy and my little video game. Again, dev streams are resuming, and if you missed it, definitely sign up for the Halloween tournament and for Quarantine Report. You can find the links
in the description below.
And on that note, have a good night, everyone. Goodbye! Paul wants his hands to look big. Ooh, big hands. This is the new Paul Frenzy.